recruiting facility and a training base. This is video distributed by the defense ministry itself, wanting to say, we did this 2 days after the attacks. Meanwhile, here's a map of France, and it shows you where police conducted raids across the country, a series of anti-terror raids. Agence France Presse is reporting they happened in Calais, in Grenoble, in Toulouse, and also reporting that more than a dozen raids near the city of Lyon led to 5 arrests today and the seizure of some impressive arsenal of weapons, because among what was seized, according to AFP, was a rocket launcher in Lyon. We're getting more information about one of the terrorists, Bilal Hadfi. He was a resident of Belgium. He was killed outside the Stade de France while carrying out his attack. You'll remember 3 bombers conducted suicide operations. Several sources say Hadfi was 19 or 20 years old. He was radicalized quickly and fought in Syria. Let's bring in senior international correspondent Fred Pleiken from Paris for the very latest on the investigation. So now we are learning every day the identity of one more or a couple of more of these suicide bombers. Tell us about the significance of what we're learning today, Fred.
Well, Hala, it certainly helps the investigators to try and piece together, first of all, how exactly these attacks here in Paris were conducted, and of course, what they're also trying to learn is how big possibly the network behind all of this is and where that network comes from. And one of the things, of course, that the French government has said is that they believe that these attacks were planned in Syria. It's something that the Prime Minister Emmanuel said just a couple of moments ago. And of course, one of the things that indicates that is that apparently 3 of the attackers had been to Syria. Now, the identity of this new man that we've just heard the identity of, Bilal Hadfi, that is also something that really very much fits into that puzzle. The fact that he appears to have gone to Syria or been in Syria as late as March 2015, the fact that apparently he did fight for ISIS there, and the picture that we've been able to obtain of him is actually a screen grab from a video which has since been taken offline that showed him calling for attacks against the West. So all of this information is, of course, very important to see what sort of network is behind all this, how this network operated, and then also, of course, how sophisticated, Hala, this network might have been. One of the things that came out yesterday, which was very interesting, was that the attackers were not only armed with AK-47s, but all of them also with suicide vests, and that all of these suicide vests were made in exactly the same way. And that certainly does show a certain degree of sophistication, a certain degree of quite sophisticated planning as well. And that's also, of course, one of the things that the authorities are trying to piece together, seeing how this network worked. Of course, also having now established that link to Brussels in Belgium, where also, of course, several arrests have been made. Hala.
All right, and we are hearing from authorities as well that they believe many, many more people than the 7 who were involved in the attacks on Friday were part of this group, planning, staying under the radar for presumably quite a long time in order to achieve this deadly series of operations on Friday. Tell us a little bit about what authorities are saying regarding how many more people might have been involved in all of this.
Well, they believe that it could have been quite a wide ring, and as we said, they believe that it would have been some coordination between ISIS in Syria and then leading all the way up to Belgium, to France, and that this communication went on for quite a long time. And there's some sources within U.S. law enforcement who believe that the operatives, the cells, might have communicated in some sort of encrypted way to try and avoid the detection, and it certainly seems as though they did manage to do that, because as you said, the authorities are also saying that it would have taken quite a long time to plan all of this, to coordinate all of this, because of course it doesn't only involve acquiring these weapons, it doesn't only involve building for instance, the devices that the attackers carried on themselves, the explosive devices, but also then they apparently rented vehicles in Belgium and then drove down here to France. One of the alleged people who was also a part of all of this was arrested in Belgium. He's apparently the man who rented one of these vehicles, a black VW Polo, that was rented in Brussels by a French national, then driven down here to Paris, and was later then found at the site of the attack at the Bataclan. So certainly the authorities believe that this has to be part of some sort of wider plot. Just how wide, just how big all of this is something that they're still trying to piece together, Hala.
Fred Poikin, thanks very much. He's Place de la République in Paris. As we mentioned, France is also going after ISIS in Syria. French warplanes dropped at least 20 bombs on targets in Raqqa, that's in northern Syria, the self-proclaimed capital of this terrorist group. And French officials say a command center, ammunition storage base, and a training camp were all destroyed. But an ISIS media wing claims the sites were abandoned before the strikes and that no one was killed. Our military analyst, retired Lieutenant Colonel General Mark Hertling, says the strikes are, quote, strategically symbolic.
I wouldn't quite believe that they have completely abandoned all of those facilities. There were some pretty good target sets there. What you also have to remember, too, is this was a handover of a target set, more than likely from the what's called the ATO, the Air Tasking Order. So when France came in and said they wanted to conduct these attacks, these target packages were already in folders, as they're called, and I'm sure the Central Command handed them over to the French fighters to attack for the symbolism of France being back in the fight. But there's much more to it than that. This is a strategically symbolic attack, bringing another coalition member into this fight, even though France has already hit targets in Syria as recently as the 10th of November. But it shows an uptick potentially in more people more nations wanting to contribute to this fight.
All right, well, the investigation into the deadly attacks has led authorities to Belgium as well. They have conducted raids and operations there. We understand that several people are thought to have been connected from inside Belgium. And Belgium is issuing an international warrant for an arrest of this particular suspect. You're seeing there the information on him, Abdesalam Salah. You see it there in French. It says, if you have information on this person, please give it to police. A source tells CNN the French police questioned actually this man Abdesalam after the attacks and pretty startlingly let him go. Now they suspect he was involved on some level in the terror plot. Parisian police are getting help from the FBI as they try to trace how these terrorists carried out Friday night's attacks. The U.S. has sent federal agents to Paris. They're trying to figure out how all these individuals communicated with each other. Now, two possibilities are encryption and the use of gaming systems like Xbox and PlayStation to communicate with ISIS in Syria, to stay under the radar, and clearly they did, because they were able to carry out these attacks. While all this was unfolding, the G20 summit opened yesterday in the shadow of all this bloodshed, and the terror attacks are dominating the agenda at this economic meeting of world leaders. The American President Barack Obama and the Russian President Vladimir Putin were seen huddled together in deep conversation in between official sessions. The White House later said they discussed Syria. Former CNN Moscow Bureau Chief Jill Doherty says the two leaders' body language shows a sign of something perhaps different, an evolving relationship. Listen.
It really does show two people leaning into each other as if they're kind of comrades, or at least there's a certain intensity about it. And then also I looked very carefully at the statement by one U.S. official after that meeting. And I think that was important. They said, Obama noted the importance of Russia's military efforts in Syria, focusing on ISIS. That is different. That is softer. It's praising the activities of the Russians in Syria. And I think that's very significant.
Well, CNN's Michelle Kaczynski is at the G20 summit in Antalya in Turkey, and she joins me now live. So, Michelle, do we know more about what was discussed between the two men? Because it's no secret Putin and Obama don't have the warmest relationship. Yet in that particular photo, it caught everyone's attention because they seemed really to be huddled in deep conversation, sharing important information. What more can you tell us about what was said between the two men?
Yeah, it looked extremely serious. I mean, it was sort of a strange setting in the middle of this reception between sessions in this big room. It wasn't exactly noisy, but it was busy, and they were just in this corner, kind of between the hors d'oeuvres and the bar, obviously having an extremely serious meeting, the two of them, and then one on each side of their aides, and of course a translator there too. So it was one of those times where you didn't see them smiling or sharing a laugh. It was all business, and it was all extremely serious. But the White House only delivers generally a brief meeting, a brief readout or a summary after one of these meetings. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail when we talked to administration officials about it later. But we know that President Obama also brought up Ukraine for what seems like the millionth time now, urging President Putin to remove the heavy artillery, to remove Russian troops, to give back the territory to Ukraine. So this meeting wasn't all about potential cooperation. It was also, at least in part, a rebuke for what has happened.
Good morning, everybody around the world. If you're watching, this is Talk, and Talk, where we must talk something. Meaning we have to talk about something. When we keep talking, you know what this story is all about. We just play this for, this is live, CNN Live, what is happening right now around the world. And we, you know, as you know, this is a free program where we talk about everything. Today we are with CNN, tomorrow we'll be with Al Jazeera, next tomorrow we'll be with BBC. Even in next sections, as the sections go on, we can always roll over to any of these stations. And of course, to make everything complete, we are also with YouTube. YouTube represents the masses, the people, what they are doing. We have to look into what is happening today in life. Of course, you all know what this program is all about. We are talking about the wrong side humanity have taken. You can listen to it from your own angle, from every other angle, but watch this angle. This angle we are going is never gone before. And we are sure you are going to love it. Meanwhile, let's continue showing you down the line what is happening now before we can diversify to so many other things that concerns us in the world that we are also going to be looking into. Okay, it's like we are on, this is not an important news to talk about, so I go on. These are one of the problems we are talking about. How did the world come to where we are today? That's supposed to be our question. How did we come to all this? If you look around the world, you know that there's a lot of things we have to be talking about. In any case, first of all, I introduce myself, Nwachukwu Emmanuel, like you all know, most of the people who's been watching the show. But I'm not very happy, like so many people. I'm not very happy about the state of the world. The fightings, the killing from both sides, whether you call yourself the ISIS, the Al-Qaeda, or whether you call yourself the government, or even if you call yourself the people, all of us, we're on this wrong side together. Something is wrong, and we have to admit that something is wrong. And if something is wrong, means it needs to be taken care of. Then the next question becomes, are we really taking care of it the appropriate way? What we are doing, what we have been doing for years, decades, is it the real way to go about solving the problem? Well, my good brothers and sisters, with what I am seeing, with what you will believe that is happening from year to year, is growth of evil. It's growing, it's not diminishing. Every day we say we want to make the world a better place. And we know the reasons why this world is not a better place. But we don't want to do it. So brothers and sisters, as you all know, this is the program Talk, and Talk, where we talk about everything. And I am Nwachukwu Emmanuel. live from Germany. So what I'm talking about is, we all know that we are wrong. The world is on a death path. There is nothing like they are making it correct. We see it going down the drain every day as time goes by, years go. Well, there's a lot of things that we are not doing right. Almost to say everything we are doing, we are not doing it right. Because the answers, the result we wish to have is not what we're having. Why then is it happening? And in a situation like that, you agree with me that when something is not going well, or when a family is not built strongly, organized, respectfully, when the children are abusive, when the children are evil, sometimes and most of the times it has to do with the upbringing, with the parents has to be responsible. I believe that we are responsible of what our children becomes. At least we have a greater responsibility as they grow. We have also limited the number of accountability, or when somebody becomes responsible or reasonable enough to think for themselves, to be 18, which is also wrong. Because we can see that even men of 50 something cannot even hold themselves to what they are seeing today happening. A lot of flexible minds get involved or get tuned up to evil so easily at very late age. How much when we are talking about our children? Anyway, we have to continue with the news, and I hope that we learn from it and have more to talk about, because in the world is always something to talk about. That's what we're doing, and we are going to go there.
Exhibition match. Sequence of events. According to the security guards in the area that we spoke with, one of the bombers tried to enter the stadium, but was stopped by security.
Now this is where we believe the second suicide bomber detonated. It's right in front of the entrance. Now I want you to take a look at this as well. We've been finding these all around the site. These are bolts, and as you can see, this one is particularly mangled, but according to the public prosecutor, these were packed into the suicide vest to cause maximum carnage.
Bombers wanted. One person who was walking by was killed, several others were injured. Otherwise, the only others that were killed were the bombers themselves. They used were poor quality, but enough to scatter the bloodied remains of the bombers dozens of meters away. Yves Bouk lives around.
Heard that this blood was the kamikazes blood. So I was feeling a little sad. Now I'm feeling less sad.
While forensics teams have swept the area, onlookers have come to the scene not knowing that they are walking over small pieces of the bomber's remains. Others cannot forget what they saw. We saw body parts there, he tells us. I didn't want my son to see any of it. I think we had no idea what was happening. Kevin Tulga still has his tickets, but one of the bombs went off before he and his son could make it to the stadium. He says his son cannot sleep, and Kevin came to France as a Kurdish refugee seeking safety from war. Says he may. He tells us, when my son realized the extent of what happened, he told me, "Don't ever bring me to a game again." So no, I don't think we can go. The blood can be washed away, but the cannot. Atika Schubert, CNN, Paris.
Well, for more on where France can even begin to go from here, let's turn to Régis Le Sommier. He's the deputy editor-in-chief with Paris Match magazine. Because Paris Match usually is published on Thursdays, but you worked all night and you came out with a special edition of Paris Match. France attacked is the big headline, so our viewers can see it. Tell us what went into putting this together.
Well, this is such an exceptional event, so we decided to move our dedication. We had teams working 24/7 on the ground. Fortunately, or unfortunately, or fortunately because they were safe, but we had a few of our reporters that were going, living in the neighborhood for some of them, and some of them were at a party in New York on a reporter mode and worked all night together what we have in the magazine.
And you have to select, and of course Paris Match is really all about pictures.
Yes.
And you had to select the front page picture, the cover picture.
Yes.
What made you...
The look of that woman, that wounded woman, sums it up. I mean, it's really all the tragedies there. There's the nurse nearby, looking at her, with fear in her eyes. We don't know at that point. We think that looks at the people, it really embodies the tragedy. Whenever there's something like to the scope of this tragedy, we need to find one person who will carry all the emotion, and that woman certainly did. Probably may tell her story afterwards. So that's what we usually do with our cover picture.
You have 44 special pages on this, and all pages as well that take us through the night, through the tragedy of what happened, including one actually of the remains of a suicide bomber. But I want to focus on the victim. We all know someone who has been killed or someone who has lost somebody. Coincidentally, a neighborhood restaurant of mine named Livio, when I lived in Paris and still have a home in Paris, the owner's son was killed at the home. This is a 40-year-old Pierre Innocenti killed. The whole street outside my apartment is full of flowers.
And I live nearby, and I knew this guy too. I mean, we all know Livio, and we all know somebody. I don't know directly someone in my environment that was killed or wounded, fortunately, but we all know somebody who knew.
Yes.
And this is why this tragedy touches us Parisians, because it's a terrible event, is that it really brought people together. I witnessed a scene yesterday in the middle of Paris. There was a bus driver who was trying to maneuver his bus and was kind of stuck in the middle of the street. I saw taxi drivers that